She was thin, shaking, and dragging her paws from exhaustion, but she didn't stop, because her babies were counting on her. When she stepped into that stranger's yard, everything changed. This isn't just a story about a stray dog. It's a story about what love looks like when it's desperate. It's about how a mother's instinct can drive her to risk everything, and how a small act of kindness from a stranger can change not just one life, but many. Stick with me, because what happened in that backyard will make you look at animals, and maybe even people, a little differently. It was one of those mornings where everything felt still, the kind of morning where even the wind seemed lazy, and the world hadn't fully woken up yet. The sky was brushed in pale blues and sleepy grays. A few cars rolled quietly down the street. Sprinklers hissed on lawns. Someone's radio played an old song, muffled behind a window. But something was off on the corner of Rosewood Lane. There, moving with slow, deliberate steps, was a dog. Not just any dog, a mother dog. And one look at her told you she was in trouble. Her fur was dirty and patchy, hanging in clumps from her thin frame. Her paws dragged, just a little more than they should have. And in her mouth, cradled like something fragile and sacred, was a tiny, newborn puppy, no bigger than a loaf of bread. Its eyes weren't even open yet. Behind her, 3 more pups tried their best to follow. Wobbly, weak, one tripped over its own paw and let out a tiny cry. But they kept moving, because their mother was moving, and she wasn't moving aimlessly. She was heading somewhere. She had chosen a destination, and that destination happened to be the front yard of a woman named Hannah. Now, Hannah wasn't someone who usually got involved in stray animal situations. She loved dogs, sure, but she worked long shifts at the hospital, and her schedule didn't leave a lot of room for surprises. That morning, she had just gotten home after a grueling overnight shift. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her eyes tired, and the only thing on her mind was a hot cup of coffee and maybe a nap before the next shift started. She sat on her porch, coffee in hand, enjoying the quiet. Then she saw something out of the corner of her eye, something strange. At first, she thought it was her eyes playing tricks on her, a dog, carrying something, but when she stood up and looked again, it was very real, and it sent a chill through her. The dog was walking straight into her yard. The mother's body language was heartbreaking. Every step looked like it took effort. Her tail was low, her ears back. She kept her body low to the ground, not in aggression, but in submission and fear, deep, bone-deep fear. But there was something else too, desperation. As she stepped onto the lawn, she stopped just a few feet away from Hannah. Then, slowly, she lowered her head and placed the puppy on the grass. Hannah froze. Was this some kind of message? Some strange behavior? It took her a second to understand, and when she did, her heart cracked open. The mother dog wasn't giving her the puppy as a gift or a threat. She was asking for help, and not just for herself, for her babies. The moment the puppy touched the grass, the mother backed away slightly, tail tucked. She watched Hannah with wide, tired eyes. And Hannah knew, this dog didn't trust humans. Maybe she had reason not to, but here she was, risking everything, because she had no other choice. And Hannah, she couldn't ignore it. She stepped forward slowly, talking gently, like she would to a frightened child. Hey, sweetheart, it's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you. The dog didn't move. She didn't run, but her body stayed tense. Behind her, the other 3 puppies were now sitting in a huddle near the sidewalk, looking completely lost. One of them whimpered. Hannah crouched near the first puppy. It was thin, so thin, its tiny ribs showed with every breath. It wasn't crying. It wasn't even moving much, just lying there, like it had given up. Hannah reached out and picked it up gently. The mother's ears twitched. She stepped forward, just one pace, but didn't stop her. It was like she was saying, okay, you can help. Just please don't hurt them. Hannah's hand shook. She was no vet, no animal expert, just a woman on her porch with a cup of coffee. And suddenly, for lives in her front yard, what was she supposed to do? The reality began to hit her. This wasn't just one hungry stray. This was an entire family in crisis. And it wasn't going to be simple. She carried the puppy inside, laid it gently on a blanket from the couch, then rushed back outside. The mother had now collapsed onto the grass, not asleep, not relaxed, just exhausted. She kept one eye on her other pups, who had now wandered slightly off the path. One was chewing on a dried leaf. The other 2 were just sitting, looking up at their mom. Hannah had to act fast. She couldn't just let them sit there. But here was the challenge. She didn't know if the mother would let her get close again. She didn't know if the puppies were sick. She didn't know if it was safe to bring them into her house. And more than that, she didn't know what had happened to them. Where had they come from? Were they abandoned? Born on the streets? Had someone dumped them? Had this mother been running for days? weeks. Hannah didn't have answers, but she knew one thing. She couldn't leave them like this. One by one, she crouched, whispered softly, and scooped the puppies into her arms. The mother stayed where she was. Her eyes never left Hannah's face. Every movement was watched, and Hannah felt the weight of that trust. A silent, trembling trust that said, "I don't know you, but you're all I have left." When she brought the last puppy inside, she turned around and found the mother standing again, still thin, still scared, but standing. She looked at Hannah. Then slowly, she walked toward the porch, step by step, as if she had decided, if her babies were inside, she would be too. Hannah opened the door. The mother hesitated for just a moment, then stepped inside. That moment, that tiny, quiet moment, it was the beginning of something no one on that street could have ever imagined. But the challenges had only just started, because the puppies needed food, medical care, warmth, safety, and the mother, she needed rest, healing, and a whole lot of time to learn that not all humans are cruel. Hannah didn't know what was coming, but she had made a decision. She wasn't going to let them down. Not now. Not after what this mother had gone through to find her. And what happened next would change all their lives forever. Hannah had never really thought about dogs in any serious way. Sure, she'd smiled at cute puppy videos online and cooed at her friends' pets when visiting, but that was the extent of it. She never imagined herself as a dog person. She didn't even grow up with pets. Her apartment had white walls, clean floors, a tidy routine. Everything was predictable, contained, but that morning shattered the walls of her predictable little world. It was still early, sunlight just starting to stretch across the sleepy street, when she opened her front door and saw her, a mother dog, thin as a whisper, standing silently near her porch, with a look in her eyes Hannah would never forget. Next to her were 4 tiny puppies, all huddled together, shivering in the crisp morning air. At first, Hannah froze. Her brain scrambled, trying to make sense of the scene. She wasn't sure if the dog was aggressive. She didn't know what to do, but one look at that mother, her body trembling, her eyes sunken, her legs barely holding her upright, and something deep within Hannah shifted. It wasn't just sympathy, it was instinct. The same instinct that rises up when you see a child lost in a crowd, or someone crying alone at a bus stop. She turned and sprinted inside, rummaging through her kitchen. The fridge had leftovers, some chicken and rice from the night before. Not much, but enough. She warmed it slightly, poured water into a bowl, and grabbed a clean towel, just in case. When she returned, the dog hadn't moved. She had curled herself protectively around her puppies, eyes tracking every step Hannah made. But she didn't growl. She didn't bark. She just watched. Slowly, Hannah placed a bowl of food on the ground and stepped back. What happened next wasn't what she expected. The mother didn't rush the food. She didn't leap forward, ravenous from days of hunger. No, she nudged one of her tiny pups forward, encouraging him with the faintest touch of her nose. Hannah blinked, confused at first. Then it hit her. This dog, this exhausted, battered creature, hadn't eaten in days. Her ribs showed. Her fur was matted and dirty. Her paws were cracked and raw. But instead of eating first, she offered the food to her babies. That single act hit Hannah like a punch to the chest. She lowered herself to the ground, sat cross-legged at a distance, and simply watched. She didn't say a word, didn't try to move closer. She let the silence sit between them like a fragile bridge, built of trust that had not yet been earned. For nearly an hour, she stayed there. The morning sun rose higher. Cars passed in the distance. But in that moment, the world had shrunk to just them. Hannah, a stranger with a bowl of food, and a mother who had no choice but to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the end of her search. Eventually, the dog inched forward, not out of confidence, but out of surrender. Her body sagged with exhaustion. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She took one bite, then another, chewing slowly. But she never stopped looking at Hannah. Never once. That's when Hannah whispered, "It's okay. You're safe now." She decided to name her Luna. There was something soft and haunting about her, like the moon, distant but still pulling at your heart in quiet ways. The puppies were heartbreakingly small. Their eyes fluttered open and shut, struggling to stay awake. One of them let out a tiny squeak and collapsed against his sibling, too weak to keep his head up. They weren't just hungry. They were on the edge of shutting down. Hannah couldn't leave them like that. She stood, gently scooped up the weakest puppy, and carried him inside. She found an old cardboard box in the laundry room, lined it with a fleece blanket, and added a hot water bottle wrapped in another towel for warmth. Then she went back for the rest. Each time she picked one up, she whispered reassurances. feeling like her words were more for herself than for them. Luna followed. She didn't try to stop her. She just followed. When all the puppies were inside, Luna climbed into the box and curled around them. Her eyes closed for the first time since Hannah had seen her. A slow, heavy breath left her chest, like a balloon finally deflating after being stretched too thin. That look she gave Hannah, just before drifting to sleep, said more than words ever could. It said, "Thank you. I don't know who you are, but I trust you now." That night, Hannah didn't sleep much. She spent hours researching online how to care for stray puppies, what to feed a nursing dog, signs of dehydration in newborn pups. She fell into Reddit rabbit holes, read blog posts from rescue workers, and bookmarked vet forums. Her phone battery died twice, and in the middle of all that, she kept checking the box. Every hour, every 30 minutes. She made sure the puppies were warm. She offered Luna fresh water. She added more blankets when the temperature dropped. The next morning, she took a few photos and posted them on her social media account. The caption was simple, raw. "A mother dog walked into my yard yesterday. She carried her babies in one by one. She looked at me like she had no other option. I'm doing what I can. If anyone can help, please." She expected a few likes, maybe a comment or two from friends. But what happened next stunned her. Her post exploded. Within hours, it had hundreds of shares. Comments poured in. Messages flooded her inbox. Where did she come from? Can I donate food? I'm a vet assistant. Want me to check them out? One message stood out from the rest. A woman named Claire messaged her privately. She said, "I think that dog used to live on our street before the construction started. She had puppies in an old shed behind the hardware store, but the area was bulldozed 2 days ago." Hannah's stomach dropped. She stared at the message, rereading it again and again. Everything suddenly made sense. Luna hadn't just wandered into her yard. She had been searching. For days, maybe longer. She had carried each of her puppies, one by one, through streets and alleys and sidewalks, through hunger, through pain, through fear. That realization gutted Hannah. She imagined Luna ducking between parked cars, hiding in bushes, waiting for the streets to be empty, walking miles on bleeding paws, carrying her children in her mouth, like fragile treasures. She hadn't stumbled onto help. She had fought for it. Hannah called a local vet clinic and made an emergency appointment. The next day, she loaded Luna and the puppies into her car. Luna lay on the back seat, curled around her babies, barely moving. At the clinic, the staff moved quickly. The pups were underweight, but responsive. With fluids, nutrition, and time, they'd bounce back. Luna, on the other hand, was in rough shape. She had infections in both ears, a high fever, multiple lacerations on her legs, and something the vet gently called exhaustion trauma. Her body had been pushed too far for too long. The vet looked at Hannah. "She's going to need serious care, medicine, rest, monitoring. This won't be easy." Hannah looked at Luna, at the mother who had refused to eat until her children did, who had walked miles just to find safety for them. And she knew her answer. "She chose me," Hannah said quietly, "so I'm choosing her back." And that was it. That was the moment her life changed. There were long nights, accidents on the floor, howls in the middle of the night. When Luna had nightmares, there were vet bills, sleepless evenings, days when Hannah cried in the bathroom because it all felt like too much. But then there were moments, small, beautiful, unforgettable moments. A puppy's first tail wag, Luna licking Hannah's cheek for the first time, the sound of tiny feet tapping across the floor. The moment Luna laid her head in Hannah's lap, sighed deeply, and closed her eyes, not from exhaustion this time, but from peace. And every time Hannah wondered if she was doing enough, she remembered the look in Luna's eyes that very first morning, that silent plea, that exhausted trust, and she promised, again and again, "I've got you now." 2 weeks had passed since Luna had chosen Hannah's porch as her last desperate hope, and in that time, everything changed. Luna, once a trembling, skittish shadow, had transformed, not overnight, but piece by piece. Her coat, once dull and falling out in clumps, now shimmered softly under sunlight. She had gained weight, enough to fill out her fragile frame, though her ribs still whispered reminders of the days she went without food. The haunted look in her eyes, it had faded, not completely, but enough that she could now meet Hannah's gaze without recoiling. And the tail that never wagged, it wagged now. In fact, it thumped happily against the floor. When Hannah entered the room, Luna would lift her head, ears perked, and give a quiet, contented huff. If Hannah knelt down and reached out, Luna wouldn't flinch anymore. She'd lean into the touch, close her eyes, lick Hannah's fingers as if to say, "I remember. I trust you now." The puppies had become tiny whirlwinds. They were chaos in fur coats, clumsy, adorable, relentless. They chased each other around furniture, skidded across floors, barked at shadows, and chewed anything that smelled vaguely interesting. Socks, slippers, electrical cords. Hannah learned that lesson quickly. They were growing fast, each with a personality all their own. One was bold and barked at his own reflection. Another was shy and always snuggled into Hannah's lap. One was obsessed with chasing tails, his own or his siblings. It didn't matter. And the fourth had a way of sitting very still and watching everything, like he already understood the world better than he should. Their eyes were bright, their bellies round, their tails curled like question marks when they walked. And every night, when they collapsed into a sleepy, tangled pile, Luna would curl around them, still guarding, still watching. But one morning, something unexpected happened. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that carries weight. Birds chirped faintly in the distance. A breeze rustled the leaves. Hannah stepped onto her porch with a cup of tea in hand, still in her pajamas, hair messy from sleep. The sky was soft with early light, the world not quite awake. That's when she noticed it. A small package, sitting neatly at the edge of the doormat. No sound, no knock, no footsteps. Just there. Hannah blinked. No name, no return address. Just a simple brown box wrapped with twine. Curious, and maybe a little cautious, she picked it up and brought it inside. Luna watched from the hallway, head tilted, as if sensing something was different. Hannah sat at the kitchen table and slowly untied the twine, opened the lid. Inside were 4 tiny collars, each a different color, soft, new, and stitched with delicate care. But what made Hannah actually gasp, were the names embroidered on each one. Max, Daisy, Finn, Olive. She hadn't told anyone those names yet. She had only whispered them to the puppies during late-night cuddles, only scribbled them down in her notebook as ideas. She hadn't posted them online, hadn't shared them with friends. Yet here they were, and beneath the collars, folded carefully, was a note. It read, "Thank you for showing the world that not all heroes wear capes. Some just carry their babies across town, hoping someone will care." Hannah's hand trembled slightly as she read it again. Someone had been watching. The post she'd made 2 weeks ago had gone viral. That much she knew. But this was personal. Someone out there had been moved, not just by the story, but by the bond. They saw Luna not as a stray, not as a statistic, but as a mother, a hero, a soul. Tears filled Hannah's eyes. She clutched the note to her chest, overwhelmed by the kindness of a stranger. Whoever they were, they understood. They saw the magic in what had happened here, the miracle. But that wasn't the end. The doorbell rang an hour later. A young woman stood on the porch, holding a large bag of premium dog food. She wore a hoodie with the logo of a local shelter. "Hi," she said, smiling nervously. "We saw your story online. I brought this for Luna and the pups. We've also scheduled a vet visit, if that's okay." Another car pulled up while they talked. A man in his late 60s stepped out. He held a box of supplies, flea treatments, puppy shampoo, treats, toys. "I don't have much, but I had a dog once," he said. "She saved my life. Thought I could pay it forward." That day turned into a blur. The living room filled with people, volunteers, neighbors, vet technicians, kids who wanted to see the puppies, old women who baked dog-friendly treats. Even the mail carrier stopped by with a chew toy someone had mailed anonymously. The internet had watched, and now it responded. Luna, for her part, handled it all with quiet grace. She stayed close to Hannah, always, but she let others pet her, let children scratch behind her ears, let the vet check her paws, without flinching. Her eyes never left her babies, until one afternoon, a young couple arrived. They'd driven 2 hours after seeing the post, said they were ready, said they'd prepared a nursery, said all the right things. Hannah brought out the puppies. 3 of them bounced around the couple's feet, licking fingers, tumbling over shoelaces. The couple knelt down, laughing. But Luna stepped forward, slowly, silently. She didn't growl, didn't bare teeth, but she placed herself between the couple and her babies. And she watched, head high, back straight, eyes calm but unmovable. The message was clear. Not yet. Hannah saw it too. The couple stood slowly, unsure. "Is she okay?" "She's fine," Hannah said, gently picking up one of the puppies. "But I don't think she's ready to let go." "Not yet." They nodded, understanding. They left their number and drove away. Later that evening, Hannah sat on the floor with Luna beside her. The puppies were asleep, snoring in soft little puffs. She ran her fingers through Luna's fur. "You don't want to say goodbye, do you?" Luna rested her head in Hannah's lap. It was the first time Hannah saw her truly relax. No tension, no alertness, just peace. That's when Hannah realized something else. Neither was she. She told herself this was temporary, a rescue, a stopgap. But over the last 2 weeks, they'd become a family. Not by blood, not by plan, but by something deeper. Something built through shared exhaustion, through trust earned in silence, through the small, quiet moments of care. Hannah looked around her home, now filled with chew toys, bowls, blankets, puppy gates, and muddy paw prints on the floor, and she smiled. She didn't want to go back to the way things were. She didn't want white walls and silence. She wanted barking. She wanted chaos. She wanted Luna. And so, the decision made itself. There would be no adoption, no separation. Luna and her babies weren't going anywhere. They were home, right there, with her, together. Life, as we know, often takes us on unexpected journeys. We go through our daily routines, ticking off the boxes, expecting everything to unfold in a predictable manner. But sometimes, life throws us a curveball, a small twist of fate that forever changes the course of our existence. That's exactly what happened in this quiet neighborhood on an ordinary morning when Hannah first met Luna. It wasn't planned. There was no grand vision behind it. It was just a simple, raw act of one being choosing to care for another in a moment of vulnerability. Hannah had never owned a pet before. She wasn't the type to rush into adopting an animal, much less a stray dog with 4 hungry puppies. She had her life, her routine, a job she worked hard at, people she cared about, and a sense of peace in her solitary existence. But fate, as it often does, had different plans. It called on her that morning, a call that led her to a dog who had never known kindness, a dog who had spent her days scavenging for food, avoiding the harshness of the world, and struggling to survive, a dog who, despite all the adversity, continued to protect her babies with unwavering determination. Luna, the mother dog, was no different from so many others in the world, born into hardship, driven by survival instincts. She had known nothing but the cold, unforgiving streets. Her fur was matted, her body frail, her eyes worn with exhaustion, yet her spirit remained intact. She wasn't just another stray. She was a mother who refused to abandon her children, even in the face of death. She crossed miles of unforgiving terrain, carrying each of her pups one by one to a place where she could seek refuge, a place where, for once, she might find safety. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't know who might help, but she knew that if she didn't try, her babies wouldn't survive. When Luna arrived at Hannah's doorstep, it wasn't by accident. It was a culmination of everything she had been through, a moment in time that brought these 2 lives together. It wasn't just chance. It was the result of Luna's persistence, the relentless determination of a mother who would go to any lengths to ensure her babies were safe. And there, in that yard, everything began to change. Hannah's decision to help Luna, to extend a hand to a creature in need, wasn't born out of obligation or pity. It wasn't a choice driven by guilt or the desire to be a hero. It was simply the result of compassion, the same compassion that we all have the ability to offer when we stop long enough to notice the suffering around us. It was the kind of compassion that says, I see you, I understand your pain, and I'm here for you. As the days went by, Luna and her puppies began to heal. The bond that formed between Hannah and Luna wasn't built on expectations. It wasn't about having the perfect relationship with an animal or turning Luna into the ideal dog. It was a quiet understanding that spoke louder than words. Luna was healing from her wounds, her exhaustion slowly giving way to trust, and Hannah was discovering a side of herself she never knew existed, a side that could nurture, protect, and love without reservation. The transformation was slow, but it was happening. Luna's coat began to fill in, her strength returned, and she started wagging her tail. No longer was she the fearful, cautious dog who had stumbled into Hannah's yard. She was becoming the dog that felt safe enough to be vulnerable, to accept the love she so desperately needed. Her eyes, once hollow with the pain of abandonment, were beginning to sparkle with life once more. The puppies, too, were thriving. At first, they had been tiny, fragile beings, barely holding on to life. But now, they were playful, curious, full of energy. They ran around, chasing each other, barking, getting into everything they could find. Their eyes twinkled with innocence, a stark contrast to the difficult beginning they had known. They were no longer just survivors. They were becoming family. But as is often the case in these stories, the real twist came when the world started to take notice. Hannah didn't do this for recognition. She didn't need to post about Luna and her pups online. But as her compassion reached beyond the four walls of her home, something beautiful began to unfold. The world, in all its complexity, rallied around Luna and her pups. People from all over, from different backgrounds, cultures, and walks of life, came together. They sent messages of support, offers to help, donations, and words of encouragement. The story of Luna's journey, of a mother fighting for her babies and a stranger stepping into care, resonated with so many people. It was a story of survival, yes, but it was also a story of love. And it wasn't just the internet that was moved. It was the local community too. Shelters reached out with offers of assistance. Veterinary care, food, and supplies arrived in abundance. The people who had once been strangers now felt connected to Luna and her babies. They saw in her the same fight, the same heartache, the same desire for a better life that many of them carried within themselves. But the most profound moment came when one day, a simple package appeared on Hannah's doorstep. Inside were 4 tiny collars, each one stitched with a name. Along with them a note that perfectly captured the essence of the journey that had unfolded. Thank you for showing the world that not all heroes wear capes. Some just carry their babies across town, hoping someone will care. It wasn't the gift that mattered most. It was the message. It was the realization that this story had touched people's hearts in a way that no one could have predicted. The simple act of kindness had created ripples, waves of compassion that spread far and wide. But the most profound realization, the one that shifted everything for Hannah, came when she saw Luna step in front of a couple who wanted to adopt one of the puppies. Luna wasn't growling. She wasn't being aggressive. She was just protecting, guarding her family. It was in that moment that Hannah knew. Luna wasn't ready to say goodbye. She had fought too hard. She had struggled too much. She had loved too deeply. She wasn't going anywhere, and neither was Hannah. In that moment, Hannah made the decision to keep Luna and her puppies, to offer them a home for as long as they needed it. Not because it was the easy choice, but because it was the right one. They had fought too much, overcome too many obstacles, and created something too beautiful to let go. Luna's story was no longer just her own. It was a story shared by all of them, Hannah, Luna, and the community that rallied around them. It was a story of love, of perseverance, of compassion, and of family. Sometimes, the strongest love stories aren't between people. Sometimes, they're between a mother and her babies, a woman and a dog, and the quiet moments when 2 lives, once strangers, are brought together by a simple act of kindness. And sometimes, the love that changes everything isn't the one we expect. It's the one that's found in the most unexpected places. For Hannah and Luna, that love was enough. It was enough to heal the wounds of the past. It was enough to offer hope for the future. And it was enough to create a bond that nothing could break. This was more than a rescue. It was a rescue that saved them both. A rescue that made them a family. Subscribe for more real stories that prove love still exists.